My name is Richard Hayes. I am 62 years old. And I never thought I would be telling this story. But sometimes life throws you into situations so raw, so unbearable, that you either collapse under the weight or you stand tall and face the truth you have been avoiding for years. What happened inside my Reno office that Wednesday evening will forever divide my life into before and after. It started with the sound of the front door slamming so hard that the glass rattled in its frame. I looked up from the invoices spread across my desk, my pen frozen in my hand. Caleb stormed in, his hood still up from the drizzle outside, sneakers leaving wet streaks across the hardwood. His eyes, once so full of boyish charm, burned with a cold fire that made my stomach knot. "Dad, I need 10 grand. Tonight," he barked. No hello, no explanation. Just a demand delivered like a threat. I leaned back in my chair, my heart thudding against my ribs. "Caleb, I already transferred your monthly allowance last week. That measly 3,000? It barely covers rent. Do you think I can live on scraps while you sit on all this money?" His voice cracked as he paced the room, hands clenching and unclenching. I studied him carefully. The way I used to study engine parts during my Air Force days, searching for fractures, weaknesses. He was my only son. The boy I had raised alone after Elena died. The boy I had given everything to. "Son," I said softly, "you need to find steady work. You're 30 years old now. I cannot keep writing blank checks." Caleb spun around so fast his hood slipped off, revealing a face flushed red with rage. "Work? Why should I waste time punching a clock when I'll inherit everything anyway? After you're gone, I'll run the shops better than you ever did." The words struck me harder than any fist could have. He said it so casually, as if my death were a business transaction, an inconvenient step toward his imagined empire. My chest tightened. I thought of Elena, of the promise I whispered at her graveside. "I'll take care of him. I'll give him the future you wanted for him." But standing there in my office, watching my son sneer at me, I realized how badly I had failed her. "Is that what you've been thinking all this time?" I asked, my voice low, controlled only by decades of military discipline. Caleb must have noticed the shock on my face, because for a moment his expression faltered. Then he masked it with a bitter laugh. "Don't look so surprised. You've been controlling me with money my whole life. You made me this way." The accusation stung, not because it was false, but because there was truth in it. Every time he stumbled, I had written a check. Every time he failed, I had shielded him from the consequences. I had confused providing with parenting, and the result now stood before me, red-faced and entitled, speaking of my death as casually as others speak about the weather. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out of my office." His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he might strike me. Then, with a frustrated growl, he spun toward the door and slammed it so hard, the family photo on the mantel rattled, Elena's smiling face trembling inside the frame. The echo of the slam seemed to go on forever, bouncing against the walls of my office, hammering into my chest. I stayed seated, pen still gripped in my white-knuckled hand, staring at that photo of Elena holding a much younger Caleb at his Little League game. For the first time in my life, I realized I was afraid of my own son. I don't know how long I sat there, motionless. The drizzle outside turned to steady rain, drumming against the roof. My reflection in the office window looked older than I remembered. Lines etched deep across my forehead. A man who had spent his life working double shifts, building 3 auto shops from nothing, carrying debt after Elena's medical bills nearly bankrupted us, only to raise a boy who looked at him with contempt. That night, sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his words. "After you die, I'll run everything better than you ever did." And for the first time, I began to consider that I might need to protect myself, not from strangers, but from my own flesh and blood. 3 days passed in heavy silence. I went about my work at the shop, tuning engines, checking carburetors, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, something had shifted forever. Caleb's words clung to me like desert dust after you die. "I'll run everything better than you ever did." It played in my head whenever I tightened a bolt or handed back keys to a satisfied customer. The betrayal had carved itself into my bones. On Saturday morning, as I sipped lukewarm coffee in my kitchen, the phone buzzed across the counter. His name lit the screen. I stared at it, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Dad," Caleb said, his voice suddenly bright, almost cheerful. Too cheerful. "Hey. I've been thinking. I was way out of line the other day. I didn't mean it. I want to make it right." His tone was slick, practiced, like a salesman rehearsing his pitch. I didn't reply. Silence is a weapon the military taught me to use well. "Actually," he continued quickly, "I have a proposal. Just you and me. A trip. Remember when we used to go camping with Mom? Out in the desert, sleeping under the stars. No phones. No distractions. Let's do that again. Let's reset." I nearly laughed out loud. Caleb hadn't touched a sleeping bag in over a decade. Had spent most of his adult life in climate-controlled apartments, glued to video games and social media. Now suddenly he wanted to rough it in the desert? "This is very sudden," I said carefully. I know. But here's the thing, my friends bailed on me last minute. And I already booked everything. Gear. Campsite. Permits. It's all paid for. Dad. If we don't go, it goes to waste." He rushed the words, like he needed me to agree before I had time to think. "Flights leave tomorrow morning. Reno to Vegas. Then we drive out to Red Rock Canyon. Just 5 days. You and me." I gripped the phone tighter, staring at the faded photograph of Elena hanging above the fridge. She used to say Caleb had 2 voices, one real, one rehearsed. This one was rehearsed. "Why the desert?" I asked. "Because it's beautiful. Isolated. Peaceful. You always said the wilderness shows a man's true character." The way he echoed my old words sent a pang through me. Once upon a time, I had taught him how to build a fire, how to tell directions from the sun, how to listen for coyotes at night. Those had been good years. Before Elena's sickness, before I replaced fatherhood with blank checks. "This could be our chance," he pressed, his voice dropping softer, more sincere. "To remember what we used to have. Please, Dad. Let's not waste it." Hope and suspicion battled inside me. Every instinct screamed warning. The timing, the urgency, the sudden nostalgia, it all felt staged. But underneath the doubt lived something more dangerous, longing. What if this was real? What if my son genuinely wanted to reconnect? Could I risk saying no? "The flights are tomorrow?" I asked slowly. "Yeah. 9 a.m. Reno to Vegas. I'll text you the details." The line went quiet for a moment. I thought about the documents sitting on my desk, the new will I had started drafting after our fight. Words I never thought I'd write. Caleb inherits nothing. At the time it felt like an act of desperation. Now, it felt like insurance. "All right," I heard myself say, though my voice felt like it belonged to someone else. "Let's do it." "You mean it?" Caleb's relief sounded too sharp, almost like victory. "This is gonna be amazing, Dad. You'll see." We hung up. I set the phone down carefully, staring at it as if it might explode. Outside, Reno sunlight glared against the hood of my pickup. I went to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and slid the will into my travel bag. The paper weighed heavier than steel. I whispered into the empty room. To Elena's photo on the wall. "If this is a trap, I'll be ready this time." Sunday morning. Reno was barely waking when I pulled my old Chevy into the airport lot. The desert sun already shimmered against the asphalt, promising a day of dry heat. Caleb was waiting near the gate, bouncing on his heels like a kid about to go to Disneyland. A brand new backpack hung on his shoulders, tags still dangling from the zippers. Perfect timing. "Dad," he said with a grin that stretched too wide. "They just called for boarding." I studied him carefully. His eyes were alert but twitchy, a flicker in the corner of his left lid he used to get whenever he lied as a child. I forced a smile and followed him down the jet bridge. The flight to Vegas was short, less than 90 minutes. Caleb kept up a stream of chatter about photography, how the desert was the perfect place to capture raw landscapes. He pulled out his phone often, scrolling through something he kept angled away from me. Every time I asked, he said he was checking the weather. "You really trust those apps more than your old man?" I joked. He laughed nervously. "Technology never lies." I didn't reply. Technology lies every day, depending on who's holding it. At McCarran Airport, the air hit us like an oven door opening. Dry, heavy, merciless. We rented a gray SUV with extra gas tanks strapped in the back. I handled the paperwork. Caleb insisted on loading the gear, though I noticed how he favored his right shoulder, wincing slightly each time he lifted a bag. We stopped at an outdoor supply store on the edge of the city. Caleb had a list ready, written in his scrawled handwriting. High-powered flashlights, extra rope, emergency flares, more gear than any normal father-son camping trip would need. The clerk, a sunburned man with a faded ranger cap, raised an eyebrow as we piled items on the counter. "Planning to get lost out there?" Caleb answered too quickly. "Just want to be prepared." Prepared for what? I wondered. The drive to Red Rock Canyon cut straight through desert that looked endless. Rust-colored cliffs rose in the distance, and Joshua trees stood like silent guardians of the wasteland. The farther we drove, the less cell service I had. I watched the signal bars vanish one by one until the phone lay dead in my pocket. "Beautiful country," I said, trying to bridge the silence. "Yeah," Caleb replied, his voice carrying a strange satisfaction. "Really isolated." We reached the ranger station by late afternoon. A battered American flag flapped over the single-story building. Inside, the air smelled of dust, coffee, and maps baked in the sun. A man in his late 40s introduced himself as Dean Marshall, former Air Force like me, now working as a desert ranger. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp. "Gentlemen, let's be clear about where you're going," Dean said, spreading a topographical map across the counter. He tapped red markers with a blunt finger. "Rattlesnake sightings here. Flash flood warnings here. Coyote packs have been aggressive around this wash." He paused, then looked at Caleb. "How much backcountry experience do you have?" Caleb hesitated, then mumbled something about camping with friends in high school. Dean's eyes narrowed. "Sir, with respect, this route isn't appropriate for beginners. There are easier trails." "Well, be fine," Caleb interrupted, puffing out his chest. "My father's practically a survival expert." Dean turned to me. I saw the doubt in his eyes. "Your call. But remember, out there, rescue can take 12 to 24 hours, sometimes longer." We signed liability waivers and watched a safety video about dehydration and venomous bites. Caleb hardly paid attention, staring instead at the sections of the map marked restricted. I rented a .45 revolver for snake and coyote defense. The weight of it on my hip felt familiar, almost comforting. Caleb gave me a sideways look when he saw it. "Isn't that a little extreme?" "Not in desert country," I said. As we packed up, Dean leaned closer to me. "Keep your eyes open out there. You've seen men do stupid things when they think no one's watching." I nodded, a chill running through me despite the heat. The sun dipped low as we drove deeper into the canyon, the SUV's tires kicking up trails of dust. Red rock walls loomed on both sides, their shadows stretching like giant arms across the desert floor. "You sure about this route?" I asked Caleb. He smiled tightly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Absolutely. No turning back now. Right. Dad?" The phrase landed heavy. Less encouragement, more finality. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the ranger station shrink into nothing. The last thread, connecting us to civilization, cut clean. And for the first time, I allowed myself to admit the truth. This wasn't a camping trip. This was a setup. By the time we found a spot to set camp, the sun had sunk low, painting the cliffs in shades of rust and blood. The air cooled fast, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones once the desert heat bleeds away. Caleb dropped his pack with a grunt and collapsed onto a flat rock, sweat darkening the back of his shirt. "This place is good enough, right?" he asked, wiping his forehead. I scanned the clearing instinctively, my Air Force training guiding every thought. Open sightlines, high ground to the west. Water trickle nearby, just enough to refill canteens, but not strong enough to flood if rain came. "Itil do," I said, already unstrapping my gear. Caleb fumbled with his tent poles, cursing under his breath. I set mine up quickly, methodically. Years of survival training never left me. I watched him struggle, ropes tangled like a spider web in his hands. "Dad, can you help with this?" He held out the knots like surrender flags. I crouched beside him, showing him how to anchor the corners, how to drive the stakes deep. He nodded as if he cared, but his eyes drifted constantly to the horizon, scanning the cliffs, not the tent. Something about the way he looked around, like he was waiting for someone else to appear, prickled the back of my neck. When the fire finally caught, sparks flying into the navy sky, the canyon fell into a silence so deep it pressed against my ears. Coyotes yipped far away. The crackle of burning wood became the loudest sound in the world. I skewered 2 sausages and held them over the flames. Caleb sat across from me, his face shadowed, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Remember when we used to do this with Mom?" I said softly. His lips twitched. She loved camping. Said it brought out the best in people. I nodded, feeling that familiar hollow ache in my chest. Elena's laughter. The way she used to tell Caleb scary stories until he begged to sleep in our tent instead of his own, it all came rushing back. But Caleb's gaze wasn't on the fire. It was on me. Intense. Calculating. "Tell me about your childhood, Dad," he said suddenly. "Before the Air Force. Before the shops. What was it like being poor?" The question hit me sideways. Caleb had never cared about my past. "It was hard," I admitted. "We worked farms in Montana summers. Every dollar came from sweat. I learned early that nothing is free." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And you think that built character?" "Yes. Hard work builds a man. Responsibility makes him strong." His mouth curved in something between a smile and a sneer. "Lucky me. Then I got to skip all that character building." The fire popped, throwing sparks into the dark. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You always seemed to know when I lied as a kid," Caleb said after a long pause. "How did you do that? How do you know when someone's lying to you?" I narrowed my eyes. Body language. Inconsistencies. The tone in their voice. People reveal themselves if you're paying attention. He nodded slowly, gaze never leaving mine. "You've always been good at reading people." The way he said it wasn't admiration. It was warning. Later, as I banked the fire and crawled into my tent, Caleb's voice drifted through the nylon walls. "Ill, take first watch. Not tired yet?" I hesitated. Had never volunteered for anything before. Not once. "You sure?" "Yeah," he said casually. "I want to enjoy the quiet. Listen to the desert." I lay down, staring at the tent ceiling, every instinct telling me this wasn't right. Caleb didn't care about solitude or nature. He cared about opportunity. The last sound I heard before exhaustion dragged me under wasn't the crackle of firewood. It was silence. The kind of silence that felt like someone waiting. The first light of dawn pulled me from uneasy sleep. Pale desert sun seeped through the thin nylon of my tent. I sat up, listening for the familiar sounds of campfire crackling, Caleb moving around, the faint hiss of a coffee pot. Silence. A silence too deep, too wrong. I unzipped the flap and stepped into the chill. The fire had burned to ash. Our gear tents, food containers, even the water jugs was gone. Only my clothes and boots remained. In the distance, I heard the faint grind of tires over gravel. My stomach dropped. The SUV. I stumbled toward the dirt road, just in time to see a gray cloud of dust rising where the vehicle had been. Caleb was gone. A scrap of paper fluttered against a rock near the fire pit. I bent down, fingers trembling, and read the jagged handwriting. Meet the coyotes. Dad. My throat closed. For a long moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My own son had abandoned me here 30 miles from civilization. In the Nevada desert, no water, no food, no gear. He wanted me dead. The betrayal landed harder than the desert sun. My knees nearly buckled. But instinct, the kind forged in the Air Force, in survival courses where hesitation meant death took over. Shock was a luxury. Survival was the mission. First rule: assess resources. I checked my pockets. Wallet. House keys. A folding knife I had forgotten was clipped inside my jeans. That was it. Second rule: evaluate the environment. The desert around me stretched wide and merciless. Red cliffs towered to the west. Dry washes carved through the ground like veins. March temperatures could climb into the 90s by noon and plunge near freezing at night. One wrong step and the desert would swallow me whole. Third rule: prioritize survival. Shelter. Water. Navigation. I scanned the ground. Faint tire tracks led away. Caleb's escape route. But beside them, a narrow game trail snaked through the brush. Animal trails almost always led to water. And water meant life. I started walking. The desert tested me with every step. Sand shifted under my boots. Small rocks cut into my soles. And thorny bushes clawed at my arms. Within an hour, sweat soaked through my shirt, and my throat burned for water. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries sharp and mocking. I made noise deliberately, clapping my hands, muttering aloud. The last thing I needed was to surprise a rattlesnake sunning itself on the path. Time blurred into a haze of heat and exhaustion. My legs shook, but I pushed forward, fury fueling me. Every mile carried the same thought. My own son did this. My blood left me to die. By late morning, the sun hung like a white-hot coin overhead. My lips cracked, and my vision shimmered at the edges. Just when I thought I might collapse, a sound cut through the desert stillness. Engines. Low. Steady. Mechanical. Not cars, something smaller. ATVs. I froze, listening hard. The sound came from the north, less than half a mile away. My heart kicked. Hope. I stumbled toward the noise, crashing through scrub and brush, ignoring the thorns tearing my arms. The engines grew louder. Voices, breaking through a stand of Joshua trees. I staggered into a clearing where 4 riders sat astride, ATVs, helmets off, water bottles in hand. They turned, startled. As I emerged, dust-caked, trembling, wild-eyed. The lead rider, a bearded man with sunburned skin and the calm eyes of someone who belonged in this land, rose quickly. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" My voice cracked, dry and hoarse. "My son. He left me here. Took the truck, the gear. Said I should meet the coyotes." The man's face darkened with disbelief and anger. "That's not abandonment. That's attempted murder." He offered me his canteen. I drank until my chest ached. "I am Dean Marshall," he said firmly. "Former ranger out here. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, fragile. But as the engines roared to life, and the riders guided me toward higher ground. One thought crystallized in my mind like desert glass. Caleb thought he had erased me. Instead, he had just signed his own downfall. The ATV ride jolted every bone in my body, but it felt like salvation. The desert blurred past in streaks of rust and gold, the hot wind searing my face. Dean Marshall drove like a man who knew every bend, every wash, every hidden cut through the land. "Well, get you to the ranger outpost," he shouted over the engine. "From there, we can radio for help. Maybe even intercept your son." Intercept. The word cracked open something cold inside me. I had spent the morning clinging to life, abandoned by my own flesh and blood. But now I wanted more than survival. I wanted Caleb to face the truth of what had done. Within 90 minutes, we rolled into a cluster of low buildings at the edge of the park. The ranger outpost was little more than a weathered cabin with radio antennas jutting into the sky. But to me it looked like a fortress. Dean's companions dismounted, still staring at me as though trying to process the enormity of what I had told them. "You're sure about this?" one of them asked quietly. "Your son left you out there to die?" I nodded, my voice raw. "He planned it. He took everything. He left a note." Dean's jaw tightened. "I've seen men lost to the desert, but I've never seen deliberate abandonment. That's criminal. Attempted murder." They brought me water, food, and a first aid kit. My body screamed for rest, but my mind spun faster than it had in years. In the corner of the outpost sat a landline phone. I stared at it, feeling my pulse quicken. I dialed Reno. "Olivia, my attorney," answered on the second ring. "Richard, are you all right? You sound. There's no time. File the new will we drafted last week. Today. Immediately." She hesitated. "Are you certain? Once it's filed." "I am certain." My voice cut sharper than I intended. "Caleb inherits nothing. Everything goes to the veteran charities, the Desert Rescue Foundation, and the scholarship fund in Elena's name. No delays. No exceptions." Her tone softened. "I'll handle it personally. By the time you're back in Reno, it'll be done." Relief washed over me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt control return to my hands. Caleb had brought me out here expecting helplessness. Instead, I had legal weapons sharper than any knife. Dean stepped beside me, lowering his voice. "What are you planning, Richard?" I looked him dead in the eye. To let my son walk straight into his own trap. That night, we checked into a roadside motel on the outskirts of Las Vegas. The neon sign buzzed, casting red light over cracked pavement. Dean arranged for the room next door, carrying with him a digital camera, a directional mic, and a grim determination. "Well set up in here," he explained, showing me the connecting door. "I can capture everything. Video, audio. The second he says anything incriminating, it's preserved." I nodded. My body still felt heavy from dehydration, but adrenaline had taken its place. On the desk of my room, I spread out the legal documents Olivia had prepared, the will that cut Caleb off completely. I wanted him to see it with his own eyes, to understand exactly what his betrayal had cost him. By 8 o'clock, the plan was set. Dean adjusted the lens through the crack of the connecting door, checked sound levels, then gave me a firm nod. "When he walks in, let him talk. Don't force it. He'll reveal himself." I paced the room, the revolver heavy at my side, though I prayed I wouldn't need it. My father's instincts warred with my training. Part of me still wanted to believe Caleb would show remorse, that he'd break down and admit weakness. But the other part, the soldier, the mechanic who knew when an engine was beyond repair, knew better. At 8:45, headlights cut across the parking lot. The SUV rolled in slow, casual, like nothing had happened. My chest tightened as I watched Caleb climb out. He looked almost relaxed, whistling as he adjusted his backpack. Dean's whisper came through the thin wall. "Showtime." Keys scraped the lock. The door swung open. Caleb froze in the doorway, his eyes going wide as he saw me sitting calmly at the desk. The will lay spread before me. Behind the connecting door, Dean's camera captured every flicker of his expression. "Dad," he stammered. How are you here?" I leaned back in the chair, my voice steady, almost casual. "Turns out I am harder to kill than you calculated." His face drained of color. He glanced around the room like a cornered animal, searching for exits that didn't exist. This was no longer about survival. This was about justice. And Caleb was about to realize that the desert hadn't swallowed me, but it was going to swallow him whole. Caleb lingered in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame, his knuckles white. The bravado id seen on the drive into the desert was gone. All that remained was shock. "Dad," he said again, voice breaking. "I don't understand." "I left you," he stopped himself too late. "Yes," I answered evenly, folding the will back into a neat stack. "You left me 30 miles into the desert. No water. No food. You even wrote me a note. Meet the coyotes. Dad." Poetic. If a little obvious. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He shut the door carefully behind him, as if sudden movement might snap the thin thread of control, holding us both steady. "You don't get it." I panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "No, Caleb. You were thinking very straight. Every step was planned. The prepaid gear, the remote trail, the lies about the weather. You thought you'd stage the perfect inheritance grab." His jaw clenched. For a moment, silence filled the room except for the low hum of the motel air conditioner. Finally, he snapped, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You've been controlling me my entire life. Every dollar, every decision. It was always about you keeping me weak, dependent. You call that parenting? You suffocated me." The words tumbled fast, anger finally uncoiling from his chest. He paced the room, back and forth like a caged animal. "If you think I didn't notice, the way you handed me money with strings attached? Every gift was a leash. Every so-called lesson was just another reminder. I wasn't good enough for you." "Caleb," I said softly, though my voice carried steel, "I gave you chances. More than most fathers could dream of giving. Education. A car. Rent money. And what did you give back?" He stopped pacing. His eyes burned into mine. "Nothing. And that's what I'll get when you're gone, unless I take it now." The confession hung in the stale air. From the other side of the wall, I knew Dean's camera was catching every syllable, every twitch of Caleb's face. I rose slowly, letting the chair legs scrape the floor. "Do you know what this is?" I lifted the legal papers, shaking them once. His gaze darted to them, greedy, desperate. "The will?" "Yes. The new will. Filed today in Reno, while you were out there playing God with my life. Do you want to hear what it says?" He swallowed hard but said nothing. "It says you inherit nothing. Not the shops. Not the accounts. Not even the house your mother loved. Every dollar goes to veteran charities, desert rescue training, and scholarships in your mother's name. The empire you thought you were killing me, for it isn't yours. Not now. Not ever." The color drained from his face. He took a stumbling step back, hitting the dresser with a hollow thud. You can't do that. I am your son." "You were my son," I corrected quietly. "But sons don't leave their fathers to die like animals in the desert." "Please, Dad," he begged, voice cracking. "You don't know what it's like, living under your shadow. I just wanted freedom." "Freedom?" I repeated, almost tasting the bitterness of the word. "So you tried to buy your freedom with my death." His mask finally shattered. He slammed his fists against the dresser. "You self-righteous bastard! You created me! You made me into this! I took a slow step toward the door. No. Caleb. I gave you love. I gave you too much. But the choice to murder me? He lunged forward as if to block me, but I raised my hand. Calm. Unflinching. Sit down. Something in my tone, command honed from years in uniform, froze him. His knees gave way, and he collapsed into the chair it vacated, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his temples. Where are you going? He rasped. To call the police, I said simply, my hand on the doorknob. He stared at me, pale, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Dad. Wait. Please. You can't. Prison will destroy me. I paused, looking back one last time. You destroyed yourself the moment you walked away from me on that dirt road. Then I stepped into the night air, letting the door click shut behind me. Inside, my son sat alone under the motel's buzzing fluorescent light, the legal document still glowing on the desk, the hidden camera recording his final collapse. And for the first time since Elena's death, I felt clarity. The next morning, the fluorescent lights of the Las Vegas Police Department buzzed overhead as I sat across from Detective Carla Ruiz. Her desk was littered with case files and half-empty coffee cups, but her eyes were sharp, unblinking. Mr. Hayes, she said, flipping through the report. What your son did falls under attempted murder and reckless endangerment. Nevada takes desert abandonment as seriously as any weapon. You've provided sworn testimony, plus video and audio from your witness. That's an airtight case. Through the glass partition, I saw Caleb sitting at a processing desk, wrists in handcuffs. His hair was matted, his hoodie wrinkled, his face pale. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his choices had finally crushed him. Detective Ruiz tapped the file. He's facing 15 to 20 years. Minimum. If the DA pushes for maximum sentencing, it could be more. I nodded slowly. Relief should have filled me, but all I felt was a hollow ache. This wasn't victory. It was consequence. The natural end to years of entitlement, years of me mistaking checks for love. Dean Marshall stood beside me, arms folded, head driven in early, handing over his digital recordings, giving his statement without hesitation. I've seen the desert take men, he said quietly, but I've never seen a son do this to his own father. Neither had I. By noon, the paperwork was complete. Caleb was officially booked, awaiting arraignment. I signed my final statement, my hand steady. The will Olivia had filed in Reno was secure now, legally untouchable. Caleb's dreams of empire had crumbled into dust, just like the note he left me by the fire. When I stepped outside, the city heat hit like a wall, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt clarifying. I had survived not just the desert, but the betrayal inside my own bloodline. Dean walked with me to the lot. So what now? Richard, back to Reno? Back to business? I looked out toward the horizon, where the desert shimmered under the midday sun. Back to living with purpose. I spent too long confusing money with love. That ends today. He raised a brow. You've got plans. Yes. I took a deep breath. The Elena Hayes Foundation. Scholarships for kids who work hard. Veteran rescue programs. Desert survival training. Caleb wanted to bury me in the sand. Instead, his choices will fund lives worth saving. Dean smiled faintly. That's turning poison into medicine. I shook his hand. Thank you, Dean. Without you, it'd still be out there. He met my gaze. We watch out for each other in the wilderness. You learned that the hard way. Your son never will. That night, back in my Reno home, I stood in my office once more. The mantle photo rattled no longer. Elena's smile shone steady behind the glass, holding a younger Caleb whose innocence was long gone. I whispered to her, I tried. God knows I tried. But now I have to let go. I opened a drawer, Pulled out Caleb's first letter from jail, 5 pages of apology twisted into manipulation, begging me to reconsider the inheritance. I fed it into the shredder, the whine of the machine drowning his words forever. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder. Some bonds can't be patched with money. But I had survived. I had found clarity. The desert, brutal and merciless, had given me a gift my son never intended: the truth. And the truth set me free.